All right. So we're going on with the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, starting on page 81. And from last week, we remember that M had his first and last argument with Ramakrishna. It says this was M's first argument with the master and happily his last. But he was arguing over quite a beautiful point that I think is really meaningful to us in the way that we treat our spiritual life, in that the argument was about whether God has form or God is without form. Ramakrishna asked him, said, "Do you believe in God with form or without form?" And M said, I believe in God with no form. And Ramakrishna said to him, "Oh, well, it's good that you believe in him with no form, but don't hold the idea that your belief is the only right one. For God can be both with form and without form." And M was rather perplexed and said, "How is it possible that God could be with form or without form?" And Ramakrishna goes and tells him, that God meets each one of us where we are, that he speaks to us as is most beneficial for us. And he talked a little bit about the guru, which I think we might get into today, about God being the guru of all, that God is responsible for teaching everyone. And so in our spiritual life, it's very important to have that understanding when we approach others. We always have to understand that God has that person exactly where he or she wants that person to be, and that it's up to us to respect where that person is. And if we're going to, without an ego idea in mind, think that we are going to be an instrument in teaching this person, it's very important for us to understand that God alone is the teacher, and that if he uses us, that's great, but we are the instrument, and it is not about teaching people our way or our ideas or our beliefs. That we recognize that God is working with that person, and we do the work to be able to hear that person, to respect where they are, and to learn what they need through sitting next to them and inquiring about what their spiritual world looks like, and then taking steps forward together. That God is always in front. For us, we're always followers of the divine, until that realization, and then it's okay to dance your feet in any way you like at that point. So this is the argument going on, and it has been finished. Ramakrishna says many beautiful things about God, in the sense that God, in the highest realization, is the absolute unchanging, one without a second, without attribute. He cannot be spoken about because words require limitation, since words refer to adjectives or limiting adjuncts, as they're called. And so God cannot be spoken about. And so God with form is called the Ishta, and that would be like a Jesus or a Buddha or a Rama or a Krishna. And that the form depends on the devotion of the devotee. God said that you can see the form of God being much like a block of ice in the ocean, that our devotion causes God to freeze into a form, and that form is unique to each one of us. That God will manifest to you as your highest ideal of love, as it were. Uh, so that is the nature of the divine. And M was talking with him about it, and M wanted to go to the temples, and he said, "Yes, but those who believe in God with form should be taught that the higher ideal is God without form." And Ramakrishna really scolded him. He said, "That's the problem with you Calcutta people. You're always running around trying to teach everybody without having learned it first yourself." And another great pointer for us in spiritual life, you know, not most of us have not seen God. And so we should not walk around with a little chip on our shoulder thinking that we know something other people don't, or that we are somehow advanced or ahead. These are all tricks of the ego, which is why it's so important to become aware of them, so that the ego doesn't get in and start driving our spiritual life. And because there's nothing worse, I don't think, at least in my life, there's nothing worse than ego mixed with religion. I think the vast majority of the world's troubles can probably be traced to that. Well, certainly to ego, absolutely, no doubt, but religion with ego mixed in with it. And you can always tell when an ego is mixed in because ego always divides, always excludes, always separates. And so when you see somebody practicing religion and speaking in terms of exclusion or speaking in terms of difference, then you can know that ego has gotten mixed with religion, because love unifies. Love is always looking for borders and bridges to cross, and is not interested in isolation or difference.
Swami, that reminds me of the story you told about some kind of unity day. And then the lead monk would always say, this is about sameness, not
Yeah,
differences.
yeah, that's on Memorial Day in San Francisco. They have a big program at the Olima Retreat, and it's usually around 1,000 people or more. And they'll have 4 or 5 speakers from different traditions come and talk about a shared topic. And Ramakrishna, Swami Prabhupada would get up in his introduction every year, and he would say, "Today we talk about sameness. Today we discuss what we agree on." And he said, "I think that there's plenty to discuss about what we agree on." He said, "And so, if we run out of things that we agree on, then we can talk about the things that we disagree on or that where we differ." And that's a very quaint way of saying it, and it's very real. And if we as spiritual folk took that to heart, the world would be more peaceful. There's no doubt. If we got together with people who have a different background or different ideology, and instead of looking for the difference, which is the first thing we always do, oh, I don't believe that, I believe such and such. If we stopped looking at the difference and started looking at the things we agree on, we would find the unity of religion, because all the religions speak about love being the one most important thing, and that the golden rule is the primary rule, to love your neighbor as you love yourself. Now, if you can agree on those 2 things, the world will change. The world will change. And so it's a great lesson for us here, that when we see other people of different religions, we should always approach them with a respect and understanding that all paths lead to God. God has them where they want them to be. And we look to learn what we share in common, as opposed to looking for what we differ on. That builds bridges, that builds relationship. It doesn't build barriers. It doesn't make one person right and one person wrong. Vivekananda, well, I could go on all day in this first sentence, but Vivekananda also makes a beautiful statement that in this world, we don't move from wrong to right. In this world, we move from lower truth to higher truth. You don't forget the things that you learned in kindergarten because now you're in first grade. He says everything grows and develops. Everything is necessary in its time and in its place. And so we should learn to have that respect toward others, and to give ourselves a break, and to have that respect and patience with ourselves, so that we can, be where we are and be content with that, to grow from where we are. That it's not something we're forcing, not something we're got a, type A attitude toward. It's a relaxed movement forward in the presence of pure love. All right. So this was M's first argument with the master, and happily his last. The master says, "You were talking of worshiping the clay image. Even if the image is made of clay, there is need for that sort of worship. God himself has provided different forms of worship. He who is the Lord of the universe has arranged all these forms to suit different men in different stages of knowledge." So we see this is a beautiful ideal, because I know in Western traditions, this is not normally how God is portrayed. We have God taking care of a select few, and those select few are expected to convert and take care of the rest. In this paradigm that Ramakrishna is teaching, God takes responsibility for every individual. Furthermore, in Vedanta, everybody goes home in the end, because it turns out that we're all one without a second. And so
Swami,
there's, yes.
question. idolatry is considered a big sin in Judeo-Christian, probably in Muslim
Uh-huh.
religion. And so the whole idea of a clay image or even a metal image is like a big cognitive leap for me and Westerners, maybe in general. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can.
I
There's
don't so narrow-minded.
no, it's not. Well, yes, and that's good that we become aware of that and then shoot to not be that. But in idolatry is an interesting idea because it means worshiping something as God. From the Vedantic perspective, really the biggest we are all of us the biggest offenders of idolatry, not because we worship an external image, but because we worship ourself. We believe ourselves to be separate and apart from God. We believe ourselves to be capable of making decisions and executing actions independent of God. We wash this body, we feed this body, we groom this body, we decorate this body, we rest this body. We worship this body as something separate and apart from God, and in a way equal to God because we believe that it's autonomous, that it's separate. So that's the real idolatry. To believe that you are separate and apart from the whole is the true idolatry. Now, when one worships an idol as God, uh, Vivekananda, well, he's gonna teach some things here in regard to that. But Vivekananda says some important things. He says when you worship an image, and this he says you should worship through the image to the reality behind the image. You know, so you don't let your worship stop at the image as the thing of worship. The thing of worship is actually a window through which you worship the reality behind, knowing that the image that the reality behind could never share the limitations and restrictions of the image. So we worship through the image to the divine. And Vivekananda says that that type of worship is what leads to moksha, to liberation, to freedom, to enlightenment. He says if you worship that image as an image, that creates karma. He says it's still beneficial, but it doesn't lead to liberation. It leads to going to Ramakrishna Loka. It leads to going to a heaven, the heaven of your ideal, so that to worship Jesus as a personality will take you to heaven into Jesus's Loka, where you'll stay with Jesus for however long. Whereas if you worship the divine through Jesus, that leads to enlightenment. That leads to self-knowledge, to realization. So the image is never thought of as God alone. It's very much like Ramakrishna says about himself. We worship the divine through the image. We look through it. It is a symbol of all the characteristics of the divine. And you can see that this is that in Hinduism, the images are not considered God. How do we know that? Because when you worship God, when you're trained in how to do the ritual worships, the pujas, the first step of the puja is to ask God to step out of your heart and to occupy the image for this given amount of time so that you can worship him, so that you can make your offerings and show your devotions and sing your songs. And at the end of those worships, you say the mantras, and the idea is God comes back into the heart, back to where he resides. The heart is the waiting room of God, or the den of God, as it were, Ramakrishna says. And so we see that the image is not being considered God in and of itself, that the image is a holder of God, much like the human body is the holder of the image of God. And that when you worship that, you look through that image at that ultimate reality, And so that's the difference in idolatry. In the Vedanta, all of the deities fold up into a singular. So Hinduism is not a multi-deity system. God manifests through multiple faces, but all those faces are his or hers, and that they are not separate and apart. So all the deities are not separate and apart from Brahman. They are all aspects of Brahman. They are all faces of the divine. So it's not idolatry because we're not worshiping them as a God independent of the ultimate reality, that they're all a reflection or a face of this divine reality. So in Vedanta, it also is a monotheistic religion with allowances for growth, for exercise, for studying, for transcending. And so they gave us images to give God a handle so that you could handle him, so that you could have a relationship with him. You know, having a relationship with the absolute, a very difficult thing to do without giving it some kind of attribute of your own. You know, quite often these monotheistic religions that say that call everybody else, multi-theist, is that they also give their God an image. They also give him a form or her a form. First of all, by insisting that it's a him or a father, so they've taken the God and they've already created an idol. And then they give that idol attributes. Oh, he's loving. Oh, he talks. Oh, he's nice to me. Oh, he's forgiving. Oh, he's merciful. So they give this God, which has no attribute, beyond attribute. You can say he has all attributes or he has no attributes, but you can't give him a subset of attributes without creating an idol. And so, but even in Christianity, that idol is allowable, because you have a picture of Jesus, you have Jesus Christ himself, which is an idol representative of the divine, of the Father. And so it's this mercy of God that he allows us to have these forms that we can identify with, fall in love with, and ultimately transcend, go beyond. So does that help? Does that make a difference?
Very helpful. Thank you.
Surely. All right. So he goes on, he drives this point home. He says, he who is the Lord of the universe has arranged all these forms to suit different men in different stages of knowledge. The mother, meaning God, cooks different dishes to suit the stomachs of her different children. Suppose she has 5 children. If there is a fish to cook, she prepares various dishes from it, pilau, pickled fish, fried fish, and so on, to suit their different tastes and the powers of digestion. What an expansive worldview this is, that God has created for all of these different people groups a religion, a set of scaffolding, religious tools, spiritual tools, so that they, according to their traditions, according to their history, according to their values, according to them as individuals, so that they can ascend and reach this ultimate realization also. So when we say that all paths are true, that is our conviction, that God is in fact working with every individual whom he loves deeply as his own to bring them to their fullest realization of their highest ideal, and that he will not allow anyone to fail. That is the nature of love. He will not leave a child behind. That is the nature of love. He will take as long as it takes to raise us all to our highest ideal, to our realization of our nature, until we touch that divine image within. And he says to him, just to make the point, very much like your parent does, he says, do you understand me? So Ramakrishna has given this lesson to M, and then he caps it off with this very direct question, do you understand me? It's this, he means this. You can also see how serious he is about this truth, because look, we're at the beginning of the gospel. We're at the beginning of his story, and this is the first lesson that he's driving home to M. It is a slightly different teaching from what most religions believe, even Vedantists. Like we do that Vedic Christianity class, and every now and then we have to get a comment in there of a Hindu who's horribly offended that we're attributing the Vedas to Christianity or some such stuff. But you see, that's what happens when ego and religion mix. We don't understand. We don't see the unity of these things. And we cut our arms off, you know. Or if you're a part of a singular religion and you refuse to look for spiritual truth outside of that tradition, you're missing some of your limbs. You'll have enough to get where you're going, no doubt. That path will also get you there. But how enriching to be able to understand the other traditions also, and to have them add to your own places where your own might be lacking, where the paint might be a little thin in that way. It's funny to me that, like, in mathematics, we don't divide off the truths of mathematics based on what teacher found them or discovered them or realized them. We don't argue about accepting mathematic truth from India or mathematic truth from Russia or mathematic truth from the Middle East, because we understand that all of these, everybody's working together for a whole, for an understanding of mathematics. It's exactly that same way with spiritual life. Until the egoists came in, spiritual life had that unity. Back in the ancient traditions in China, Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism were considered a triad of truth. They weren't considered separate and apart. They were considered a block, a unity of understanding. And so spiritual life in this world is the same. All cultures, all people have been working out these truths, trying to understand our nature and our purpose in this world for tens of thousands of years. To cut off tens of thousands of those years and only count the last 2,000 and a single teacher with a single subgroup is silly. It's ignorance, and we should broaden our mind. And it's well into the time to do that, because we are a world where the borders are all rubbing together. We're having to start to work to live together because we can't get away from each other anymore. Every place is populated. So it is nigh time for us to understand that religion and the quest for the divine belongs to every human being, and that God is in love and working with every single human being. So he says to M, "Do you understand me?" And M humbly says, "Yes, sir." How, sir, when we fix our minds on God. All right, so M understands. All right, I'm putting the argument away. Let's get down to it. How do I get my mind to be centered on the divine? And the master tells him, repeat God's name, sing his glories, keep holy company, and now and then visit God's devotees and holy men. The mind cannot dwell on God if it is immersed day and night in worldliness, in worldly duties and responsibilities. It is most necessary to go into solitude now and then and think of God. To fix the mind on God is very difficult in the beginning, unless one practices meditation in solitude. When a tree is young, it should be fenced all around, otherwise it will be destroyed by cattle. This paragraph right here is so important. And you say, why is that so important? It's so important because I have been around religious people actually my whole life, but I've been in the Ramakrishna order, for 23 years. And I can tell you, at every opportunity when there's when question and answers are available to the public, to the devotees, somebody will always raise their hand and say, I can't keep my mind focused on God. How do I keep my mind on God? This is the only answer. There's not a one-shot, fix it all, there I'm done answer to that question. That question is a matter of habits. And habits are a matter of time and repetition. And so habits create our character. And so to have a character that can see God will take some time. Will take time. And the time mostly is for us to suss out the meaning of infinite grace. That the time that we invest is not so much attaining realization, but trying to reach a place to where we can accept realization, where we can be willing to surrender our self, our identity, our separateness in the face of pure love. We can't do that now because we're afraid, because we don't trust, because we see our own impurities and we see our own histories, and we're not quite ready to let go. But he says,
Mommy,
yes.
I don't feel afraid of that. Like I'm afraid of like old age and spiders. I don't feel afraid of enlightenment. Or I'm not sure what you mean when you say we're too afraid.
Yeah. There underlies, and this, you can think as you like to think about this, but in my experience in myself, there underlies all of us, I believe it's everybody, a primordial fear, a fear that keeps us holding on, clutching on to the definable, that the idea of letting go of what we know and to fall into the unknown is a mortal fear. I had I won't tell them. I'm not going to tell that story publicly, but but
Fear of
there's
dying,
what's that?
like the fear of death.
Yes, absolutely, the fear of death. That if you were, let me put it in a I forget what you call that, a story. If at this moment you could leave your body, that just by a decision, I'm going to leave my body, and you knew there was no coming back to it, you weren't quite sure where you would go or how it would go for you when you left the body, but you could do it. Would you do it? Maybe, maybe not. But even if you were willing to do it, it would be a process, right? Look at how it is to jump off of the high dive. As a kid, I went to the high dive at the municipal pool and I climbed on. There was a huge line to go up the ladder. And so everybody's in line. There's people standing, hanging on the ladder all the way up to the top. And so I get through that line, I get to the top, I walk out, and it's the super high dive. So it's the real big one. And I stood there and I was like, why did I do this? I'm not going to jump off this. I'm not going to, I'm not going to do this. And I turned around, and in the most humiliating time of my life, I climbed back down that ladder past all those people that were standing on the ladder to get back to the ground. I was like, no, no. Every single one of them was like, come on, come on. And I was like, no, 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 not going to do that. We have that same thing in us. We're not aware of it because it's not often brought to the front. We don't think about it. But when it comes to the front, at that moment when you are laying on your deathbed and it's time to go, uh, chances are there's going to be some trepidation inside of, oof, okay, here I go, all right. And you're going to gather your wits and you're going to go. And of course, seems to turn out quite beautifully from the people we hear from. But nonetheless, there is a primordial fear that we have that prevents us from being willing to surrender what we know in the face of the infinite or the face of the unknown. And it is one of the primary reasons that we're not realized. Mother says you can have your realization this moment if you want it. The fact that we don't want it means that we're holding on to the unknown, which is a much lesser deal than realization. It's nowhere near as good as realization. But, we're playing let's make a deal, and we're choosing to keep what's in our hand rather than to take a chance on door number 2. And so that's the fear I'm talking about, and it's a fear that's not in the conscious mind, but it's a fear that underlies the experience of being alive,
Thank you.
Yeah, being separate and small. So he says, how do you keep your mind on God? 1, repeat his name, right? Repeat the name of the divine, because the name of the divine and the divine are one and the same. They can't be separated. The form and the name cannot be separated. So God is within you. Say the name. Second of all, sing his glories. Just walk around the day, just singing, how beautiful is the sunrise, how wonderful is the day. Just go around and sing about the delights of your highest ideal, of the purest love you can imagine. So sing those songs, sing that ideal out as you go through your day. Keep holy company. Hang out with people who are interested in being good people, who are interested in striving for their highest good, their highest ideal. Hang out with people who are interested in learning how to be unselfish, who are interested in learning how to serve and care and give and be engaged. So keep holy company, and now and then visit God's devotees and holy men. So go to people who know, who have seen these things. My whole journey started in India when I met Pravrajaka Mokshaprana, someone who I could tell had seen or experienced something very deep because of the intense peace that came off of her, because of the deep connection that she made just by looking at me. So he says, hang out with holy people, hang out with people who love, people who love unselfishness, namely people who love God, since she is both of those. The mind cannot dwell on God if it is immersed day and night in worldliness. This is something we should become aware of and consider. That is, that we spend, 12 to 14 hours a day immersed in worldliness. And when I say worldliness, what do I mean? I mean in the world of the changing, the world of the mind. I'm talking about a world of cause and effect, a world of time, past, present, and future. That we spend time living in a world that reinforces our idea of being a body mind. And then we sit for, our 45 minutes of meditation once or twice or maybe 3 times a day for that short amount of time when we wonder, why can't I see God? Why haven't I realized God yet? Well, that time that you're taking, the 3 hours you're taking to think of God is were it not for the presence of God, it would not be enough to even put a drop in the bucket for the effect that the other, 15 hours are having on you during the day. But because those 3 hours are directly tied to the presence of the divine, they're extremely powerful. And if they're done with sincerity and earnestness, they can easily push against the other 15 hours of the day, no problem. But don't take your practice lightly, and don't minimize your practice, because this is the truth. You're working against your realization much of the day. And our exercise is to minimize that and to become aware of the presence always. And that awareness of the presence alone is enough to transform us, to bring us to our realization. So it is necessary to go into solitude now and then and to think of God. Swami Prabhupada used to always be so sad because we maintained that beautiful retreat in Olima for the devotees. And very rarely did any of our own devotees use that retreat. It was always filled with people from other centers, the Buddhists from Jack Cornfield's place down the street would come there. Their teachers would come and use our facilities to have their retreats, to get away from all of their own devotees and students. But our own devotees would not often go and take that time aside, take that time away. And so here Ramakrishna is giving a very important time, every so often, and it's up to you how often and how often you can afford or how long that time should be. But every now and then, weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever, take at least a day or two and go somewhere outside of your normal circle, to a retreat center somewhere, to the woods somewhere, go camping, go to the beach. But go, leave your cell phone at home, leave your computers at home, leave your books at home. Just go and be with the divine. Go be with your inner self. Don't take any distractions. Go and be with God for a day or two, every now and then. This is necessary, he says. It's not optional. It's not just a nice thing to do. He says, if you want to see God, if you want to realize God, this is a necessary part of it.
You have to give your mind time to stop, to slow down, and to consider its real nature, which is not tied up in time-space causation, past, present, and future, and a world of objects. To fix the mind on God is very difficult in the beginning unless one practices meditation in solitude. When a tree is young, it should be fenced all around. Otherwise, it may be destroyed by cattle. And this is a beautiful thing right here. He says, because, a lot of these restrictions, we're like, well, what do you mean? I don't want to not be able to talk to some people, or I don't want to not be able to hang out with certain people. Like, absolutely, the ideal, the highest ideal is loving everybody as your own. But in the beginning, when your mind isn't really sure of who you are, when your mind is a little unstable in your idea of self being Satchitananda, or love, wisdom, and existence, it's better to limit those people who are detrimental to that idea for a while. It's not the ideal of the religion. That's part of the problem in this day and age, is some of these religions have taken that as an ideal, to exclude people that don't agree with them, or to exclude people that aren't living up to their sets of values, is part of their mature teaching. That's not the part of a mature teaching. The mature teaching is to love your neighbor as you love yourself, period. But in the beginning, you might have to separate yourself from some people until your own mind grows. It's because of your weakness that you're separating from them, and not because of their unworthiness or their weakness. It is because of your own. And you only separate from them long enough to do your exercises so that you can strengthen your mind, so that you can serve them without being caught. All right, very important points that he's making right here, as he's really setting up M for his success. We're seeing the very first meeting between M and Ramakrishna, and we see that M becomes a saint. And so he's laying the groundwork for becoming a saint. To meditate, you should withdraw within yourself, or retire to a secluded corner of the forest, and you should always discern between the real and the unreal, what is impermanent. By discriminating thus, one should shake off impermanent objects from the mind. That's an extremely tall order. But it's that constantly going around, because when does he say you should discern? He said always. Not during practice, not during lectures. Always discern between the real and the unreal. What is real? That which is unchanging alone is real. That which changes is unreal, right? So if you think about that, what is the one unchanging thing? It's you. It's that in you that wants to know these truths. It's that within you that is looking through your eyes, that within you that is listening through your ears, acting through your body. That self, that divine self, which is before your attributes, before your mind, before your body, that self is the divine presence. That is the image that God has placed of herself within you. That is what you express in this life. That is the purpose of life, is to fully express this unconditioned, divine, infinite love within, and to express this infinite, divine, unlimited wisdom within, and to do it each moment by being that, this highest ideal. Shake off all of the impermanent changing things in your mind, and stay focused and established in the shrine of the heart with that infinite, unchanging, ever free, ever pure, ever blissful self that is your real nature. And do it so often so as to root your sense of I in the unchanging self of the shrine, and not in the constantly changing flux of the mind and the world that the mind creates. M, humbly, how ought we to live in this world? right? Natural question. Oh my God. Well, if I shake off all of these ideas of changing things and I go into solitude every now and then, I become convinced of my unchanging self. How how do I catch the bus? How do I go to work? What do I do? And the master says, do all of your duties. Keep going as you always go on, but keep your mind on God, right? Live with all. Live with your wife. Live with your children. Live with your father. Live with your mother. Serve them. Treat them as if they were very dear to you, but know in your heart of hearts that they do not belong to you, right? Understand this is the world of changing. This is the world of impermanent. As much as you may love your parents, they're going to go away. Your children are going to go away. Your partner is going to go away. All of these things are going to go away, and you should not forget that. You should not rely on them for the answers and fulfillment of your life, because they will go away. So how do you live? You serve them. Everything that you do, just like the image on the shrine, so is your husband, your wife, your child. They are the idol of God through which you worship the divine reality behind them, beyond them. You worship through them by taking care of them, by loving them, by serving them, by nurturing them, by encouraging them, by being a strength in their life, a source of wisdom and stability in their life. So you are consciously aware always of the presence of God in all things, and you learn to treat all things with the respect and love that you have for this divine ideal. That's how we live. We don't stop doing our duties, our responsibilities. We simply change the reason that we do them. We don't do anything for them with the idea of gaining from them. We do everything as an expression of our knowledge of our own divine self being an endless source of love, an endless source of wisdom. And from there, we love and we become unselfish and we transcend the limited. Do all of your duties, but keep your mind on God. Live with all, with wife and children, father and mother, and serve them. Treat them as if they were very dear to you, but know in your heart of hearts that they do not belong to you. A servant in the house of a rich man performs all of the household duties, but her thoughts are fixed on her own home in her native village. She brings up her master's children as if they were her own, even speaks of them as, oh, my little Rama, oh, my little Hari. But in her own mind, she knows very well they do not belong to her at all. You see, this is the attitude we have toward the world. It's always maintaining that knowledge that this is dreamlike. These are things rising and falling within the mind of God. They are not real in and of themselves. They are expressions of the divine. But we see God behind all of them. And that's what makes them beautiful. That's what makes them important. That's what makes them lovely. And when we know that, there's no problem appreciating their loveliness, their sweetness, their personality, their style, whatever it is. But always know it is the God behind them and through them that you love. The tortoise moves about in the water, but can you guess where her thoughts are? They're on the bank where her eggs are lying. Do all of your duties in the world, but keep your mind on God. If you enter the world without first cultivating love for God, you will be entangled more and more. Yes, as you start chasing things in the world, you will chase more and more. This is not just wisdom, this is truth. Take a look, start discerning in your life, go and look. Those things that you find pleasurable, that you search out for their pleasure, will you ever have enough of them? This is why we have alcoholism. This is why we have drug addiction. This is why we have sex addiction, addiction. All of these things, because they are not satisfying in and of themselves for more than a short period of time. And everything that you do in this world can only give you one thing. Well, it gives you two, but they're both worthless. It will give you distraction, certainly. And sometimes that's the only peace that we get in the world if we don't know our nature. We find peace in distraction. So all of the things you do in the world can only give you distraction. The second worthless thing they give you is a memory. And why is that worthless? Because that memory is what replays in order to form a desire for more. So you go and you have your favorite meal. Ah, it's wonderful. You're very happy until you get home, and the next morning you're like, oh God, I'm so stuffed. Whatever. You enjoyed that meal. It was fine for its time, and you'll probably be fine going along for a day or two. And then you'll remember how good that meal was. Oh my God, that food was so good. Sweetie, we should do that again sometime. Right? And you do it again. And what's that do? It replays that memory and makes it deeper. That's what they call samskaras. And that is the reason spiritual life is difficult. It's not because the task itself is difficult. Realizing God is obvious and should be very easy for us. But it's difficult because we've created habits that have a momentum behind them that have to be undone. We have to get back to zero before we can transcend. And that's why religion seems difficult. That's why spiritual life seems difficult. So those are the only things this world gives you. So keep that in mind when you're out partying, dancing, drinking, drugging, whatever you're up to. No, fine. It's not that in and of themselves those things are anything. They're a mirage. But they are a mirage that will prevent you from your realization, from your highest ideal, from becoming that which you have always known yourself to be. They are the things that cripple you and force you into repetitive cycles that hurt you, that are the source of your suffering. So get that kind of sobriety through constant discernment, and then you can walk away from these things. They will no longer have mastery over you. If you enter the world without first cultivating love for God, you will be entangled more and more. You will be overwhelmed with its dangers, with its grief, with its sorrows. And the more you think of worldly things, the more you will be attached to them. That's what we're talking about. The more you run that pleasure through your mind, the more you're going to want it. And the more it's really even worse than that, because what happens if say you love to drink wine, right? Well, the first time you have wine, any wine is fine. You don't care. You'll drink it out of a box in the fridge. Who cares? You love your wine. But if you get into wine, you become a connoisseur of wine, and suddenly just the box wine from Safeway is not good enough. Now you've got to go up to a particular winery in a particular region of a particular part in the world that's gotten particularly good whatevers for producing wine, and you have to have that wine. Your box wine's not good enough. And so the amount of effort that you have to put into your desires increases with the better you become at them. The more you enjoy them, you have to take on that idea of connoisseurship. Things get more expensive, they get harder to find, they get more rare. It's the same thing with sexual partners. If you allow yourself to see people as objects of pleasure, well, that's going to make you start working on your own self so that you become more handsome or beautiful. And then you start insisting that people be at least as handsome as you are, or at least as in fit as you are, before you will even talk to them. You see, and your standards will go up and up and up and up. And the time it takes to find acceptable people becomes more and more and more and more. And you and your ability to attract beautiful people, it gets more and more difficult because you're turning into an ass. Because you're mean to everybody, and you're haughty, and you think that you're beautiful, and your body is great, and your hair is perfect, and you've spent all that money on your clothes, and you turn into this, elite twat that nobody wants to be with. And that's the joke. That's the problem with this world. And that's why spiritual seekers circumvent that problem by understanding its nature. There is nothing there that can be added or taken from the soul. Nothing. It's a zero-sum game. Walk away from it and keep your eyes on this beauty. Keep your eyes on this dream of pure love, of pure wisdom, and of a bliss everlasting based on a freedom that's free of desire. Nothing controls you. The more you think of worldly things, the more you will be attached to them. First, rub your hands with oil and then break open the jackfruit. The jackfruit's super sticky. If you don't rub your hands with oil, it'll get all over you. First, rub your hands with oil and then open the jackfruit. Otherwise, they will be smeared with a sticky milk. First, secure the oil of divine love. That's the oil that protects us. That's why we sit absorbed in meditation in the presence of the beloved, in the presence of divine love, because we don't want the world to stick to us. We don't want to become attached to objects, to pleasures, to experiences, to things, people, places. Why? Because they will all go away. One of the things Swami Prabhupada was so careful about, one time I wanted to put his picture on the website, because I thought everybody puts their pictures on the website. We should put a picture up there with your bio, Maharaj, so that people know that you're at this center. Oh my goodness, was he disturbed by that idea. He said, what? Do people come to this center to see me? What a waste of time this is. We come here for Thakur Ma, Swamiji. We come here for the ideal. You know, the second thing he also told me one time was like, I asked him one time at the table, I said, you know, you're so warm with the devotees. You're so personable. I said, but with the monks, you are so stoic. I said, it's just, you seem so distant. And he got very pensive for a moment. He says, yes, you see, it's true. He says, because if you begin to rely on me for your encouragement and for your strength, if you rely on me for your sense of belonging and your sense of your monasticism, what will happen to you when I go? Where will you get that from? He says, I am distant from you because you should be reliant on the master and on the shrine for your inner strength, for your contentment, and for your growth. And that will be independent of me always. So this is the truth of the matter, you know. This is what Ramakrishna is talking about here for us. So first, rub your hands with the oil of divine love, and then set your hand to the duties of the world, right? But one must go into solitude to attain this divine love. Oh, he's bringing it up again. So if you haven't been out in some divine solitude in the last from yesterday until 6 months ago, put it on your calendar. It's time for you to get some divine solitude to think of God. It's necessary. You can't do it without it. Ramakrishna here has brought it up 3 times in his first conversation with M, one of his primary disciples. To get butter from milk, you must let it set into curd in a secluded place. If it is too much disturbed, milk won't turn into curd. Next, you must put aside all other duties. Sit in a quiet spot and churn the curd. Only then do you get butter. Further, by meditating on God in solitude, the mind acquires knowledge, acquires dispassion, and acquires devotion. All right, so sitting in the presence of God is the only thing that's necessary. You know, Swami Prabhupada said, the knots of Maya, the knots of ignorance, the knots of confusion, untie themselves when confronted with divine awareness, with the divine light, when placed in the light of awareness. So when we sit in our presence, sit in in meditation in the presence of the divine, in this pure love, this pure wisdom, just sitting in that presence is enough. You acquire knowledge. That's not going to be the knowledge of facts and figures and objects in the mind, a set of relational studies or philosophies. That's not the knowledge he's talking about. He's talking a divine knowledge. A divine knowledge is spontaneous knowing. It's walking into a room and knowing exactly what needs to be done, not because you've thought about it or calculated anything out, but because you know. because your life is finally an expression of yourself, a self that you now know, a love, a wisdom, and an existence. And so this is the knowledge it will give you. It will give you the knowledge of what to say, what to do, and how to be in every moment, spontaneously. That's divine knowledge. And he makes a distinction of this earlier. I think we talked about it last week or the week before last. You know, the difference between divine knowledge and worldly knowledge. Worldly knowledge is in the mind, so it's in the world of change. It's a matter of cognition, thinking, analyzing through space, time, and causation to get what you want. That's worldly knowledge. Divine knowledge is spontaneous knowledge that's infinite in its nature, inexpressible in its nature, but always available to you at the moment that it's needed, at the moment that it's necessary. Right? So you get this divine knowledge. You basically quiet the mind enough so that you can hear yourself, so that you can hear this divine song within, the Bhagavad Gita, as you will, the song of God. It gives you dispassion, right? Because it teaches you the nature of the world. When you touch the real moment, the eternal moment within you, and you realize it's there always, has always been, will always be, you understand that the things of the world come and go. They add nothing to you, they take nothing from you. That the best they give is distraction, forgetfulness. But it's a forgetfulness of divine love, a forgetfulness of an immortality and a strength that can't be broken inside. So there's quite a price if you don't. So he says this gives you this dispassion, and it gives you devotion. How does it give you devotion? Because you're sitting in the presence of unconditioned love, something you cannot do in this world. And as you sit in the presence of unconditioned love, you will learn from the experience of that what this love is. And love always inspires a response of love, a returned love, or sometimes a love that's even greater than the original love. If someone's willing to love you and to be kind to you, you will love that person and respect that person and be grateful for that kindness forever. That's a wonderful thing. So sitting in the presence of God will naturally cultivate this appreciation of an unconditioned divine love that is beyond anything that we can learn in a world of the changing. But the very same mind goes downward if it dwells in the world. In the world, there is only one thought, lust and greed, right? Lust and greed. And why is that? Is it because we're awful, horrible people? No. It's because we are infinite, divine people who are inhabiting a finite space. And in this inhabiting a finite space, we are trying to recapture an infinite self, an infinite love, an immortality, an infinite power. We're trying to manifest that in a world of limitation and restriction through all of the things that we chase in our desires. All of our desires are only names of God. And if you run around the world trying to collect objects that reflect that name, objects like money, like beautiful people, like knowledge, information, you won't be able to create your infinity in the finite world. That's why they say go within. You have all of this within you. The only way to fulfill a desire is in this moment. And in this moment, you are all that you need. You have all that you need. And if you can quiet the mind, you have all that you want. You can find contentment even here. So in this world, there is only one thought, lust and greed. The world is water and the mind milk. If you pour milk into water, they become one. You cannot find the pure milk anymore, but turn the milk into curd and churn it into butter. Then when that butter is placed in the water, it will float. So practice spiritual discipline in solitude and obtain this butter of knowledge and love. Even if you keep that butter in the water of the world, the two will not mix. The butter will float. So this is how we survive the world. We do our practice in the presence of divine love, becoming secure in our knowledge of ourself, what we are, the nature of the world, so that we can let go of it without remorse, without regret. And we can put our eyes on the divine within and live our life as a response to that unlimited love. Live our life as an expression of wisdom, love, and existence. All right, that's it.